everyone, and welcome to the Field of View podcast, the first episode. I will be your host today. I am Brian, and I am joined by a wonderful person who enjoys the Smash community. Jesus, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right.
I am joking. Obviously, we are here to have fun, and we are here to talk about something me and Jesus like here. We are going to be talking about the F1 season, first half of the 2021 season. We are actually 2 days out, right? Saturday, Sunday. Yeah, 2 days out. I can't count. I don't know what day of the week it is. But we are 2 days out of the Belgian Grand Prix, the start of the second half of the 2021 season, where the headline of this season is pretty much Max Verstappen versus Lewis Hamilton, Red Bull versus Mercedes, Giant versus Giant, and then there's McLaren. What do you think about that?
Oh, I mean, first of all, you're more than McLaren at third place. Ferrari is also tied with them.
True. My bad. I do forget that one of their drivers decided to put the car on pole and crash it at the same time. My bad. I forgot about that.
Oh my god! When Leclerc did that, it was like, oh wow.
I watched that half awake and I was baffled.
Yeah, actually, I was watching it live on my phone, and I ended up. I was like, "Oh my god!" When I first saw it, and I just shared it with every one of the RCC editors at the time.
Yeah, I was half awake, and half awake Brian doesn't really comprehend things most of the time. And then watching somebody just put it in the wall in the most renowned track around the world, just his name means everything. You put it on pole, a Ferrari puts it on pole, but then you hit the wall. No fault to Charles Leclerc. I know he was trying to get every inch of that car to get the best time. He was going quicker, if I recall correctly, on that second lap until he crashed. And yeah, he ended up not starting that race, which was, I think, the first time in almost, what was, like 30 years?
I mean, well, obviously, people look at it as a conspiracy, as like he did that on purpose. What happened is he hit the right side of the barrier, then he lost his tire, then just boom, hit the wall.
Yeah, I did not hear any of those conspiracy theories. I did hear that it was only the second time in a very long time that somebody put the car on pole at Monaco and then crashed out and did not start the race. So,
And this is in his home Grand Prix, by the way.
which is the worst part? It's like Lewis Hamilton going to Silverstone and just sending it into the gravel trap. Oh wait, he sent somebody else in there. That's a different story. We'll talk about that later on.
Yeah.
Firstly, obviously this is a new podcast. This is the sports podcast for the Viewpoints newspaper at RCC. This first one we're going to be talking about F1 as the episodes go on. We'll be actually talking about more things, so college sports, like RCC sports, actual professional sports, other Division 1 college sports. We'll be talking about a lot of those things. But today's episode, mainly F1. But we do want to start off with the expectations up to this point. Jesus, what did you think of the teams up to this point? We're heading to Spa. Everybody's had almost a 4-week break. We ended with a surprise winner at Hungary. But comparative to last year, to this point, after the summer break, who's standing out for you?
To me, the teams that are like really standing out for me are both Red Bull, Alpine, and Ferrari. Those are like the three that I'm looking into, because if you look at last year, Ferrari wasn't a falling up. They fell apart, honestly, and they. I don't know if this is the right term to be using, but they kind of let down Sebastian Vettel at the end there. Well, and then you had Renault, now Alpine, within a big midfield battle, and then Red Bull is just never close to the title. And look where we're at now. Red Bull is now competing for that title. We have Ferrari back in the trying to win the midfield battle, and then Alpine now leading the middle of the pack in the midfield.
They're actually making up ground. If I look at my very extensive notes from a couple of days ago I made, Alpine is fifth. So they are fifth from last year to this year, but they actually have significantly less points than they did last year. Ferrari, as you were saying, is the big surprise. They're tied for third right now with McLaren at 163 points apiece. Last year, Ferrari was only at 80 points heading through 11 races, heading back from the break. Uh, um, I would agree to a certain extent. I think more for me, Ferrari, yes, is the big surprise. Red Bull, not so much. I'm more surprised that the driver championship's a little closer than it was compared to the last year. Because last year, Hamilton just ran away with it. There's no way he was gonna get caught. Not even Verstappen, not Valtteri. Nobody was gonna catch him. But Williams is doing significantly better with Mr. Saturday, as they like to call him, right?
I mean, that's how people refer to George Russell, and big props to Williams for getting both Nicholas Latifi and George Russell in the points. That was just, I mean, part of it was luck on that first turn, which we will get into later. But this is just hard work that was meant to happen because Russell was getting consistently. He got 2 times into Q3. Latifi, this was his much needed breakthrough.
It really was. I was watching that race, the latter half. Obviously, they were focusing on the battle up front, and then later on in the race, they focused on the roadblock that was Alpine. We'll get into that later. But what Williams have done ever since the Williams family stepped down, it's been an uptick. Comparative to last year, no points up to this point. They were dead last. They were only competing for 17th to 20th most weekends, if I'm correct. But now, like I said, you have Mr. Saturday, George Russell, making it Q2, Q3. It seems like on a constant basis the last, let's say, 5 races or so. Compared to last year, he wasn't even close to that. And you said Latifi's on fire. On that note, obviously Haas is going through a transition. What do you think of this Haas team comparative to last year's Haas team?
Well, you have to go in mind a couple of situations that they had to endure. I mean, obviously, this dates back to 2019, where they had their failure at Rich Energy, and they lost out on a lot of money, and therefore their team went down sinking. And then there was the little arguments between their former drivers, Kevin Magnussen and Romain Grosjean, and eventually they just couldn't afford them. And so, I think what happens this year is that they're punting the season because they don't have enough money to significantly have a chance at the bottom of the field. So they're just hoping to save enough money for the 2022 regulations and then see if it works out.
Okay, so on that note, I know we'll talk about this later on in our predictions, but just to ask us now on the note of Haas, do they make it past 2022? Do they stay in the field past 2022?
I believe they do, and it's because Gene Haas thinks that they do have a significant chance to get the team back up and running to the way that they should be. And with the growth between both Mick Schumacher and Nikita Mazepin, I think if they keep growing at a good constant pace, they might have a chance to compete at the bottom of the field.
Good points, good valid points. As long as we don't see the return of Mazepin, I think we might be fine. For the American F1 team, as it likes to be called, but right now it seems more like a German American F1 team. But
actually, on that note, I feel like the F1 memers that are going around social media, they seem to be calling Haas the Russian car because of the way their livery is.
it is true. Actually, right before the first race at Bahrain, if I recall correctly, that car was actually being investigated for actually breaking protocol, because if you recall, Russia was part of a doping scandal in the Olympics, which part of the whole issue ended up being they were fined and they could not represent their flag. Well, their flag can't be shown on as a world competitor. So if you saw this past Olympics, you only saw the Russian Olympic Committee flag instead of the Russian flag. So that was an issue that actually trickled over the F1 as well, because Mazepin. Sorry, that came to my head. It was a complete error, actually.
I mean, who could blame you at this point with all these memes going around?
Well, granted, the first 4 races he spun out on every, if not one or two, practice sessions. But going back to the note is the liveries bared similarly to the Russian flag, so it got investigated. Obviously, nothing happened because obviously they must have told them, "Hey, we're fine. We're the American F1 team," but that's neither here nor there. On the note, I wanted to talk about win differential from last year to this year. Last year, Mercedes through 11 races to this point where we're at in the season actually had nine wins through 11 races, and the other 2 wins last season went to the Honda teams, but not just one of the Honda teams, both Honda teams. AlphaTauri got 1 win with Pierre Gasly, and then Max Verstappen got the other one. Compared to this year, Red Bull has more wins. Actually, yeah, they have one more win than Mercedes does. Uh, this time, you actually have both drivers for Red Bull on the victory step. Mercedes only has one driver, and then obviously we have a non-Mercedes, non-Red Bull driver on top of the podium step as well compared to last year. Last year, Pierre Gasly. This year, it was Esteban Ocon at Hungary. What do you think are the main differences that they kind of did to kind of shift that balance for Red Bull and Honda?
I think this might be incorrect, but like, I think something that both the Honda teams, Red Bull and AlphaTauri, did was that they took. I mean, obviously, when they knew the championship was over, they decided to like see like what could they do better in terms of not only the driver lineup, which Red Bull did struggle at the time, but also like their powertrain, their vehicle. So I think they took both steps into account, and it seems like their hard work's been paying off.
Gotcha. And it does seem it has because I did go a little too hard on my notes. I will say that now. I did end up looking up how many podiums each of the top 10 drivers had last year and how many they have this year. Through 11 races last year, Hamilton was on the podium 9 different times. And that included 7 of his wins and then obviously the other 2 on the second and third step of the podium. The person that followed up to them, so I'll just go through the top 5 on that one. Valtteri and Max Verstappen followed with 8 podiums each, and then you had Daniel Ricciardo with 1 podium. Surprisingly enough, Charles Leclerc had more podiums than the 5th place points driver last year. Last year, Sergio Perez was 5th in the points, had no podiums through 11 races, while Charles Leclerc was 8th and had 2 podiums. Obviously, a bit of a shift there, but what kind of going on to that midfield battle? It's changed compared to the last year. Ferrari is higher up now. They're competing top 5, top 6 very consistently. Alpine is kind of touch and go right now with that top 10. And then you have Aston Martin touch and go as well. A little more go than touch lately. And then you have AlphaTauri and McLaren. Who, aside from McLaren, because it seems like McLaren has poised himself to be that 3rd place team right now, who brings up the rear of like 4th and 5th in your opinion? Knowing what happened last year with the teams, with Ferrari's issues, now a resurgence this year. What's kind of your thought process of how did they improve? What did they have to do to get to a better point this year? And what did the pink Mercedes do wrong?
Well, I think the first thing that, I think both for then Racing Point and Ferrari, like they both had a driver switch, which for Ferrari they announced a little earlier and it received major backlash from when it initially got hit, which was Sebastian Vettel being let go by Ferrari, and then for some reason Racing Point thought that it was a good idea to bring him in, which with the results right now, if we don't, we're going to do this later, Vettel has been on point, but it's just like it's never on a consistent basis. And then as for Ferrari, they decided to go to complete their driver rebuild with Carlos Sainz to back up Charles Leclerc, and that seems to be paying off for them big time, alongside what they learned from their massive down year last year, which was to upgrade whatever they fixed, which at the time they were supposedly cheating with their engine when they won 3 races in a row, and now they've learned their mistakes, and now Ferrari's in a tight battle for 3rd. while Aston Martin seems to be like falling apart. But it's not over yet, though. I mean, Aston Martin can still go fifth, but that's an entirely different battle we'll talk about.
Actually, I have this right here. Aston Martin is seventh in the points, while Ferrari, as we mentioned earlier on, is tied for third with McLaren, and they are about almost 100 points off that third, fourth place battle. So,
Yeah,
uh,
like here's the thing though, like the McLaren Ferrari battle, that's going to be separated as the top of the midfield. The battle between Alpine, Aston Martin, and AlphaTauri is in the middle of the midfield, which is what I'm trying to refer to.
gotcha. See, I sometimes group them all together because, as I slightly hinted at,
Because if you look at the point
Alpine's.
of
Go ahead.
if you look at the point differential between the two teams tied at third and then Alpine, you'll notice it's a significant amount.
It is. It is. To give you the exact points right now, fifth place, and I'm going off the midfield that you're talking about. Alpine's at 77 points, AlphaTauri's at 68, and then Aston Martin is at 48 points, which is that core midfield battle that you're talking about. And then if we look at the top tier midfield battle that you're talking about, it's at 163 points a pop between Ferrari and McLaren. The only reason I personally group them, and this is a little bit of my NASCAR and IndyCar understanding, because we see a lot of big teams go touch and go. They'll be competing in that top 10 or even top 5, but then sometimes they'll be outside of those top 10s. And McLaren, McLaren, Ferrari, Alpine, AlphaTauri, and Aston Martin, all of those teams had at least one driver that finishes outside the top 10, or if they finish within the top 10, it is a very struggling finish. It is not it's not that consistency that we have seen, like from, let's say, their lead driver with the McLaren, Lando Norris, and then Ferrari, Charles Leclerc. And if we go on Alpine, it's seen both drivers have good weekends, have bad weekends, and it flips within. And then Pierre is the lead driver for AlphaTauri, who's up there, while Yuki Tsunoda is a little more farther down. Kind of still, obviously, rookie season, he's getting his bearings. But then if you look at the Aston Martin team, that's where you kind of see where the issues may arise when you're looking at the points, because you have Sebastian Vettel, who has taken him almost, 8 races to get used to that car, because it was at Azerbaijan. He got his first
Six, that's
podium for the
six.
team. Oh, 6 races. Okay, my bad. Sorry. Or however long it was. But yeah, 6 races to get used to the car.
Technically 5 if you count his fifth place finish in Monaco. Technically 5.
We're talking about podiums here. No, that does make sense. No, that you do have a point there. But then when you were mentioning this to me, that when Seb has landed on the podium, Lance Stroll actually either crashes out or has a bad race. So that's why I group them together. And then, like, kind of going to my background, why I say it's like NASCAR and IndyCar, you have NASCAR is Joe Gibbs Racing, Hendrick Motorsports, Team Penske, and Stewart Haas Racing, the Haas NASCAR team. They always have drivers that are within the top 10, top 5, but then they have their other drivers that'll sometimes pop up in there, and then sometimes will go back outside the top 15. And then IndyCar, the top teams there is Team Penske, uh, Andretti Autosport, and Chip Ganassi Racing. And there's been a bit of a swing for Chip Ganassi, but when you look at Penske and Andretti, they have similar things like that. But that's why I kind of group them together. But what's kind of your take on that midfield battle compared to last year? Obviously, there was a completely different thing. You saw Renault, Racing Point, and McLaren Racing, if I recall correctly, all the way into Abu Dhabi to solidify who's third. Do you think it will take that long this year to get to that point, or are we going to have a solidified third place team and fourth place team before the season finale?
In terms of the McLaren Ferrari battle, I really think this is going to come down to Abu Dhabi because there's been a couple of factors here. Obviously, we got Lando Norris heavily leading McLaren on this literally breakthrough season. He's currently third in the driver's standings, while it seems to be like a letdown for Daniel Ricciardo right now. I mean, we all expected the McLaren team to be like this dominant third place team that could challenge for podiums almost at least a lot more consistently, but it seems like it's just Lando Norris that's just doing it. Lando currently has 3 podiums, while Ricciardo has not gotten better than I might be wrong on this. I don't think he's gotten better than 6th in most of his races.
I will skim through my notes real quick. I don't see higher than 6. I think he had a 5th place finish. Maybe I could be wrong, but nope, not that I can see through 6 races. And yes, this is happening on air. I am checking my notes as a professional would. But on that note, I think, and this is again going back to my understanding of different forms of motorsports. I don't think it's as bad as everybody's making it seem like with Daniel Ricciardo. I feel like 2020 he struggled way more than he's struggling this year, because this year he's had way more top 10s and finishing within the points comparative to 2020, if I'm correct, right?
I mean, that would be correct, but here's the problem. The Renault of last year, it was not exactly the best of the midfield cars, where the McLaren this year is much stronger, yet it's taking him longer to get used to it than like most of the other drivers that transitioned.
True. That is very true, because most of the drivers, if you recall the comments from Sergio Perez, he said, give me 5 races, and at the 6th race, I will get you a win. He did do that. 6 races for Seb. He got a little bit used to that Aston Martin car, and then Carlos Sainz was doing way better than he was playing teammate to Lando Norris last year, kind of going toe to toe with Charles Leclerc. But you wanted to say something there?
Yeah, because like I think here's the other big factor in this midfield battle. Both Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc have been really consistently scoring points. They've really doing a better job. Like most of the fans on social media think that Ferrari has the best driver lineup, and right now Sainz is currently beating Leclerc in points. And if they keep this consistency up, they might just steal first from McLaren.
I do agree, but this is a new phrase I've heard from my own podcast listening. The poop housery that happens at the start of the races sometimes, with people getting wrecked, sometimes does make those races a little bit harder to kind of figure out who will be, and this is my own opinion, because driver lineup, yes, that is the strongest driver lineup, because they get along, they're getting results, they're pushing each other to be competitive, and that's what you want as Ferrari. They're getting that with this pairing, and I hope they stick with it past 2022, because that's when a lot of contracts are up. But I doubt it, due to certain reasons that we'll get into later. But I do agree. But I feel like, hopefully, and this was my mind, I was thinking about this when as we were leading to record this. I feel like Daniel Ricciardo needed that break. Because after the break in 2020, if I recall, he started to be a little more competitive in that very terrible Renault. I feel like a break is what he needed, and it's going to help him, especially in that 3rd place battle for McLaren, which the constructors is going to be very tight, not just at the top, but throughout the whole field, in my opinion, except for the 18th and the 19th and no, what am I talking about?
8th, 9th,
The 9th
10th.
and 10th place position in the constructors.
Which is currently between Williams, Alfa Romeo, and Haas in order. And I do think Williams will be able to finish in 8th. I do think so.
They do have 5 more points than Alfa Romeo, so that is the. It seems like it, and I have a very bold prediction later on. But with that being said, let's kind of review. Let's do a little bit of a review on the Grand Prix of the last 11 races that we've gone through. Bahrain. Let's just ask the question: did you watch it? And I know the answer is yes.
I did, but not the way I wanted it to, because at the time I couldn't view it, so I had to like go scroll through YouTube and find a little audio recording of the live session, and that's how I did it for the first 3 races.
Gotcha. So,
I did
obviously,
watch it, just not the way I wanted.
makes complete sense. Anything stood out to you in that first race? Just so
Um,
we can kind of get an idea of what does Jesus think when he's watching a race. So what did anything stand out to you in that first race? And we'll try to do that through each race leading up to what we're going to talk about with Spa later on.
Okay, on the first race, after the safety car by Mazepin, which he unfortunately spun the car in the third corner, which
Proving my point.
but like after that, Pierre Gasly made a pretty rare mistake in losing his front wing when he collided with Daniel Ricciardo, basically ruining his race. And then there was also the little accident between Vettel and Ocon at the back, which honestly did not help Sebastian in any favor that race. There was also Yuki Tsunoda's aggression, which actually was helping him at the time when people thought he was actually good. And like his aggression is what made him work over at AlphaTauri on the first race. But I think the most polarizing part was the quote-unquote controversial illegal overtake that Verstappen did during his battle with Lewis Hamilton and near the end of the Grand Prix, where he did overtake Verstappen, but all 4 wheels were off the track.
And if I could interject here, you and me had a very interesting conversation about this because you were a little questionable on the wording I used. I was the one who told you controversial. Why did you think it?
Well, I wouldn't exactly use the word controversial. Also, your mic is muted. I wouldn't exactly use the word controversial, but like that's how I was told. I didn't think it was controversial because I thought it played by the rules, where it's like it made sense. I just don't know why people would argue against it.
See, in my mind, it looked like a clean pass. I actually did watch the actual video feed. I wasn't I didn't face those problems early on that you faced, so I do apologize. We should have communicated about that, but
I did watch the race highlights. Don't worry.
Gotcha. It looked like a fairly clean move, in my opinion. It was a racing deal. When I used the word controversial, I used it because that's how it was framed in the media, how a lot of people referred to it. Personally, I don't think it was a penalty. I feel like Max should have kept the position because this is what I heard, and maybe obviously we're not race control, we're not in the cars, we're just fans, enthusiasts looking from the outside. We're in the outside looking in. I had heard that Lewis Hamilton was doing very similar moves on the same part of the track in the same out of bounds that was classified by race control, and he wasn't penalized at all, but Max was. So that's where I kind of landed. I'm like, oh, okay. If you let it for Lewis, you should let it for Max. So I think Max should have kept it. But one thing that stood out for me, and as we've gone on to where we're at now, I feel like that moment was very telling of what this championship battle is going to be and is right now. Do you agree or no?
I actually agree because I initially thought the move was going to be like not going to be like once every race every now and then, because I thought it was going to be another Mercedes dominant season, but obviously I kind of underestimated the Red Bulls out there because I knew they had the potential to win races. I just didn't think they would do it on a consistent basis.
Which I was pleasantly surprised when I saw that Verstappen was less than a tenth of a second closer to Lewis than about a second and a half. So that was very nice comparative to last season. Next race was Emilia-Romagna, which is, as I like to call it, Italy 2. You gave me some flack about that the other day. that was the first wet race we had at that track in a very long time. It was crazy. But do you think that the balance of power when it comes to that front two cars, did it begin to shift at that race, or did it happen later on in the next, 9 races? Or was it beginning to show at this second race?
I believe it was beginning to show at that race because during the time, I mean, I also like to point out that Lando Norris would have been qualified in the front row. I don't think this time would have stood because of the qualifications afterwards by both Perez and Hamilton, but he had P2 and then track limits turn 9 deleted that time. But like, if you notice throughout most of the race, you had Hamilton spinning off at a moment, nearly getting. Oh wait, did I have this correct? Yeah, I think he was still chasing Verstappen, and Verstappen had a huge lead during the time, and Hamilton was just like super behind.
He was. You are correct. As I wrote down in my notes, Max sits back after the Bahrain race, and that is the simplest way to put it because he put on a clinic. We will exclude the moment where he was warming up the tires and spun out, but that is a different deal. Other than that, he put up a clinic.
Wait, wasn't that Mick Schumacher that did that?
Oh, no. Yes, it was. It was Mick. And if you go back and look at the highlights for that race, while after Lewis had gone off and there was a safety car that came out because of Mick,
No, the safety
Max
car was
warming
out.
up the tires. What was that?
The safety car was out when Mick spun.
Yeah. Oh, well, I think it was extended, something like that. It was under safety car.
Yeah,
Max
it was
warming up
extended.
the tires, and he had everybody behind him, and he almost lost it on one of the, I think maybe turn 3 or 4. He almost lost it with the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc behind him, and I think
That was a red
his
flag.
teammate was behind him too.
That was the red flag period, which that happened after a massive crash that was involved between both George Russell and Valtteri Bottas.
Oh, yes. We will talk about that implication later on. That did happen in this race. That has changed the silling season, as they call it, of F1 on its head. But earlier today, we had a major piece of that fall into place to find out what's going to happen with that. But we'll talk about that later. Obviously, Max won, Lewis second, and then that was actually Lando's first podium of the season. It was up to this point he was 4th and 3rd, so very consistently to start off the race. From there, we move on to Portugal, as I believe at this race, it was how I put it in my notes was this is what we expected of the season, a very flat out race. You had the first 4 were actually both Ferrari cars and not Ferrari, my bad.
Mercedes.
Both Mercedes cars and both Red Bull's cars. And then you had a bit of a more consistent top 10. Lando in the McLaren, Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari, Esteban Ocon in the Alpine. You got Fernando Alonso, Daniel Ricciardo, and Pierre Gasly. In my opinion, that was the most normal race we have had this season.
Yeah,
Do you
because
agree or disagree?
I agree because it was pretty much almost uneventful, other than the one thing I truly remember the Portugal by, which was Kimi Räikkönen running into his own teammate and basically didn't finish the race.
That's true. And the only reason I'm looking at my notes is I believe this is when we first started to see the pit strategies coming into play.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Actually, no, it wasn't this one. Because I don't think
it was this one or the second one or the next one. But I had something written down. I sometimes can't understand my own handwriting. It is a problem. But it is not a problem for Lewis Hamilton because he ended up winning that race. And Max Verstappen coming back in second. Valtteri Bottas got his second podium of the season up to this point. And then Sergio Perez, Lando Norris will round out the top 5. From there, we get to move on to, if I recall correctly,
Spain.
We go to Spain, as I like to say, without an S. It was pain for Verstappen. Another loss. And this is where we had the pit strategy happen.
Yeah, because I recall this is the first live race I actually watched in full control the way I wanted it, and the Red Bull Max's engineer said it could be Hungary 2019 all over again when he did the undercut.
And once I saw the undercut, I had so many flashbacks. Because again, like I've said before, I've watched other forms of motorsport and I've seen this happen. I've had flashbacks to like every race that's happened, and that was a daunting thing at 6 a.m. So, what we're talking about is in the latter parts of the race, Mercedes decided to switch up the strategy and add an extra pit stop to their strategy, to their race strategy. Max's tires were starting to go. Lewis's tires were fine. He could go to the end at that point, but they knew there was a big enough gap to pit, have Lewis come out. The goal, I believe, was to come out in second or third, correct?
Yeah, it was.
Okay, so that was the goal. That was the goal to come out. Ended up coming out third. The interesting part, aside from Lewis hunting down Verstappen, was the little battle that Valtteri had with Lewis. What were your thoughts on that? With Bottas not letting Lewis pass by as quickly as Hamilton would have liked.
So the context here is that Bottas was, I think he was, I'm not sure if this is actually true, but like I think he's sick and tired playing the second teammate role where it's like
it is true. He's been open about that.
And he's wanted to like be competing with Lewis. So it's just like he's more the team player. And I think what he tried to show there was he's not going to away team orders if he doesn't have to. But like at the time, I just don't think it worked out because Lewis eventually overtook him, and the same result just happened.
That's true. That's true. And I believe at this point we have the most.
I also wanted to add. I think he was given team orders to let Lewis through.
He did. He did get team orders, and he openly disobeyed. I remember the broadcast even called him out, saying that is very interesting. Well, this is not direct quote. This is me paraphrasing. It is very interesting to see that Valtteri is not listening to team orders. He has been open about this. And this is now me talking. He's been open about not being that team player. We've had this conversation through messages, and if you recall the Drive to Survive last season, when they did the Russia episode, where Valtteri Bottas gave a tow to Max Verstappen so he can finish in third. That was the first instance first open instance of him not want to be that team player. Am I correct?
Yeah, because I think Mercedes were still aiming for a 1-2 lockout.
Yes, and this was in qualifying. They were looking for the front row lockout at that point, and it didn't pan out because Bottas, and for lack of a better term, I believe he used this terminology as well, went into business for himself. Do you think, obviously we'll talk about this more later, will affect Valtteri later down in the road, knowing that he started that mentality. He's had that mentality for a long time, he said. But it seems like he's since that Russian race, he's been more open about not being that second driver, wanted to be equal to Lewis. Do you think that could hinder him, or could that propel him to a better seat next year?
I honestly think it might be a hindrance because I think what Mercedes don't want to happen, and this may come later up in our later sections, and this might be true, that he doesn't want they don't want the Nico Rosberg situation for a second time, like the toxic rivalry, the battle for first and second. I don't think they want to see that happen again.
Which I agree to. I do not want to see that because if you recall, Nico was in the booth for this last race, and that was very interesting to have him talk about his former best friend. I would presume. I don't know if they're still friends. I could be wrong.
I'm pretty sure they're still friends. It's just like. I'm pretty sure they're just friends. They're just not friends on the track sometimes.
Yeah, I recall him saying that attitudes like that can kill friendship. But what wasn't killed heading into the next race was Max Verstappen's hopes of racetracks in the world. And we briefly talked about this, was that the Charles Leclerc incident. But Monaco was a very interesting race. Not for the podium finish, because everybody pretty much stayed the same. Podium won Max Verstappen, Carlos Sainz, and Lando Norris. Carlos Sainz bagging his first podium for Ferrari. The interesting part was the 5th place finisher, and you alluded to this earlier. Sebastian Vettel finally getting a top 5 finish in points for Aston Martin. What did you think about the move coming out of the pits? Did you think it was like the amazing move, or he just got lucky? What were your thoughts on that move?
My thoughts is the FIA director screwed up. That's all.
Why is that?
Because in the midst of the action, the FIA, the F1 directors thought it was a good idea to cut through the action and interrupt us with Lance Stroll.
Okay, so at that point, I don't blame the FIA. I blame the broadcaster, whoever was in charge.
Yeah, I apologize.
Yeah, no, you're good. You're good. The TV producer is who we blame. Obviously, it's a very difficult job. I do not want to be in that seat ever, because I've seen behind the scenes of producers just trying to cut to each camera, and that looks like a terrible job. But other than that, it was a pretty straightforward race. Oh, I did overlook this. The pit strategy for Lewis Hamilton came back to bite him. I think the first time this season, and maybe in about a season and a half, where he did not finish within the top 5 or within the podium. He finished 7th at this race because of a bad pit strategy, as well as Valtteri Bottas having to retire because the wheel nut would not come off. What are your thoughts on the whole Mercedes Monaco weekend on that day?
Okay, about the Bottas situation, he's had bad history of bad pit stops dating back to last year, which was insecure, where they double stacked and then they mixed up the tires. I mean,
that was a
at this
different
point,
problem.
Yeah, I know, but like, how many times is Valtteri gonna get unlucky in the pits? Like, seriously.
I agree.
It's retired.
I don't think it's the team. It's just I just feel like the track conditions, and it's not even like, so obviously track conditions are one thing, but I mean like everything revolving around the race can sometimes get even into the car. It could affect even the car. This is not being superstitious. I've just seen too much motorsports around. But circling back, the Lewis situation.
Yeah,
who do you have at fault on that one?
I think it's a strategist, because when I saw Lewis in the radio, he said that he could have taken the tires a lot longer, but they pulled him in soon.
Why would you? I do recall hearing that. And this is one thing that I especially when it comes to open wheel racing, that kind of, I know drivers, especially of that caliber. Lewis is the highest caliber of drivers. And as a strategist, you have that driver that's capable. Why do you think he didn't trust him to extend the tires?
I think it's a matter of two things. I think versus the track conditions, and the second being how hard it is to overtake in Monaco. I think they were just hoping for a super undercut, but I don't think it panned out, because, as you saw, both Pierre Gasly and Sebastian Vettel both overtook Lewis, and then Perez soon after.
Yeah, true. I do agree with that, and that does make sense. The undercut can work, but it can come back to bite you. From there, we went on to the Azerbaijan, or as I like to say, Baku Grand Prix. This race was interesting. You told me that this was your favorite race of the season. Why? Why was it your favorite race?
It was action-packed from the beginning. Obviously, we know Baku for being probably the best track for overtaking for the longest time, and unfortunately, it didn't pan out the way we all hoped, because this was if I recall this is my favorite race. I remember there was a Red Bull 1-2 taken away because of a tire blowout, and then there was tire blowout, which was earlier by Lance Stroll, which for me, to be biased, that kind of ticked me off at the time.
I agree. With the first part, I am not an Aston Martin fan, so I cannot attest to that part. But this race, in my opinion, I did tell you this was not my favorite race. It's up there. It's up there with one of the best races of this season. But I don't think it's my favorite race, just because it's a tricky track, and it's not because of that. It's just because I think it's just more of we expected one race, but we got another. It didn't underwhelm the race. The race was good. Don't get me wrong, but just personally, not one of the more difficult tracks. Later on this year, and maybe we'll talk about this in the podcast later on. Well, not this episode. Later down the episodes.
Oh yeah. Oh.
Gotcha. Yeah. So yeah. To where I'm going at. The main thing is 54 race point scoring ended for Lewis Hamilton at that point. Sergio Perez got a second win of his career. Seb got a podium, and Pierre Gasly coming back to the podium. Really, aside from my own personal bias, really good race. I went back to look what was the last time Lewis was actually, aside from the 54 race stat, it was Austria 2018. So very impressive from Lewis Hamilton, very long. But yes, from there we go on to the French Grand Prix. Anything stood out to you in that race?
Red Bull pulling the Uno reverse card on Mercedes, honestly.
Very true, very true. The pit strategy, the Spain incident became the pain incident for Mercedes in the French country. Max getting another win, Lewis having to settle for second, and Sergio Perez on the podium for that race. Both not only just on the Max's car, but Sergio Perez actually had a very interesting pit strategy as well that ended up working out.
I actually want to add this real quick. But Valtteri was complaining that it should have been a two-stopper for him, but it came out really badly for his tone.
Which leads to our further descent later down that we will talk about. But yes, that did happen as well. And from there, we went to the doubleheader in Austria. We had the Styrian GP first. Max is just extremely good at that track. We should just take it off the schedule. What are your thoughts?
It was just dominated by Verstappen, to be honest. And then I think the one thing I remember about the doubleheader is that this was Bottas's best result, was second in Austria. But another thing is that Raikkonen crashed Vettel at the end of the race, which wasn't important, but like it's just a bad mistake that Raikkonen just did. Yeah,
he has had a season to forget. To correct you on that, that was actually the Austrian Grand Prix that Vettel got second place. We are actually looking at the Styrian Grand Prix, as I like to say, Austria won.
No, Bottas got second. I know he didn't get second in Styria, but I was referring to that.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Well, Styria, same track, same thing. It's just a different weekend. So yes, Max got another win and just flexing how good he is in that. And interesting thing, this is where we started to have the fastest lap shootout between Mercedes and Red Bull. That's the only thing I think of. That's just the start of that. This gets very more interesting later down as we talk. Austria, pretty similar. We had Max, Valtteri, and Lando on the podium for the Austrian. 3 straight wins for Max Verstappen, and then Lando also showing he is very good at this track. Any thoughts on that?
And my real thought, honestly, is that Lando should have finished second.
I do agree to that. The gamer of F1 should have finished second.
Also, there were also just way too many penalties that race. There was 7 given out. 7.
Okay, we won't talk about that because that's a different mess.
Yeah, that's a different mess.
That's a different mess. We will talk with the FIA if they ever answer our emails. From there, we went to the Great Britain Grand Prix. We had the first time of the sprint race. What did you think? Just a quick thought. What was your thoughts on the sprint race?
It felt fine for a qualifier method, but I think it kind of just undoes. I mean, it's like the second chance qualifier, where it's just like it kind of just undoes it. And to me, it felt like it was a little too long.
Gotcha. Yeah. I liked it on the first watch, but now that I've heard a lot of opinions on it, it doesn't seem as fun anymore. But I will have to ask. We will, if I know you're listening, Tim, our producer, if we can have an extra 5 minutes just for this, because we do need to talk about this. obviously we had Lewis win this race, but without a controversy. There was a very controversial incident at the beginning of the first lap. You're giving me a look of what am I talking about? There was no controversy. It was a racing incident. I know I'm crazy. But we had the incident between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. What are your thoughts on that part?
I don't think it was a racing incident. I think it was somebody was at fault, and I think it could have been a racing. It could have been a racing incident, but like the problem was like it was just a bang bang play. But like the Verstappen was threatened right there. Like as soon as they touched.
I do agree. Again, I'm referring back to my my other motorsports. I watch with NASCAR. We have 4 races that are on super speedway tracks. They have a specific passage for that, and we like to some fans and a owner, Gene Haas's co-owner in F1, likes to call those races the Demolition Derby 500. That's what I saw, and that was very frightening. You do not want to do it, especially with these cars. But I don't think it was a racing incident. Do you? So on that note, do you think the penalty was harsh enough? Yes or no?
No, I honestly don't think so. And the reason being is that Lewis had repair problems, the same thing as Verstappen did, but he got lucky that there was a red flag and they were allowed to fix it. And then the penalty doesn't compensate for it.
That is true, which I do not understand because all other different forms of motorsports do not allow that. But that is the FIA's situation. We are not the FIA. Also, when I mentioned that fastest lap, we actually, at this point, actually involved other teams on the fastest lap battle for Mercedes and Red Bull. I believe this was a race where Pierre Gasly got the fastest lap. Oh, was it Hungary?
I think it was Perez that got the fastest lap there. But he was like so far in the back because he had spun in sprint.
Oh yeah. For those who don't know, if you're not within the top 10, you do not get the point for the fastest lap. But it was either this race or next race. Both Red Bull and AlphaTauri took the first fastest lap, and that took a championship point away from Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton. But Lewis got the win. Charles Leclerc a very impressive second place, and Valtteri Bottas rounded up the podium. What were we going to say there?
After the race, Christian Horner still tried to appeal the penalty.
On that note, what are your thoughts on Red Bull's comments after the race?
I think they're just unsportsmanlike because
was it too far?
It was a little too far because we do get it. It was not fair, but you don't need to like go out of your way to get it to your way. I mean, like, when's the point we have to move on?
That's true. They did go on almost into the next race weekend complaining about this. We've had this. I've heard this talk in NASCAR as well, that the teams that wreck other teams should pay for it. I find that silly because why do you get funded by sponsors? They are the ones, and you have a team behind you that build these cars. I do feel for those people, but that I do agree that some of the comments, especially from Helmut Marko, did go a little too far. But we will mention that in a later portion if we have time. From there, we go to our last race of the first half of the season. It was Hungary. It was a very interesting race where Max, again, for the second race in a row, was taken out in the first lap by a Mercedes. Is there a Mercedes target on Max's back? Yes or no?
I don't think so. And my reason is Valtteri's trying to play team player to Lewis, but like he's gotten unlucky with that one because he, under weather conditions, he ran into Lando Norris, who overtook him, and then there came everything that happened.
True. I believe Valtteri Bottas was given a 5-grid penalty for this upcoming race. I believe.
And so did Lance Stroll.
Lance Stroll and Mazepin. I was about to say it again.
I don't remember Mazepin got a penalty. I don't remember him getting one.
He did get one, but it was for a pit road incident with
that was Raikkonen that did that.
Oh, I don't know who. It was one of them two. It was between them two who got it.
Raikkonen released early. Ah, great, and my camera died. Okay. Well, here's the thing.
All right, we're good. We got the audio here, but let's continue.
Raikkonen was released early, which caused Mazepin to lose his front tire and out of the race.
That I believe you are right on that. We will go back and check that. But also the very interesting thing that I recall from that from outside from the top 10, well, inside the top 10, but from teams that are not normally there was the Williams of Nicholas Latifi and George Russell actually finishing in points. And we actually had a very interesting comment on the radio from George Russell, which was sacrifice my for a paraphrase, like sacrifice my race for Nicholas's race, prioritize him. What were your thoughts on that? Was that a coded message to Toto Wolff that I will be a team player, or was that genuinely George Russell being that teammate?
I think it was genuinely George Russell, because the other time that I think this goes back to Sakir, where he had that failure, which was honestly Mercedes' fault, but like it shows that he's considerate, and like during the times of the Williams failure, he empathized with them because he knows their pain.
Gotcha. I do agree. There was some talk that it could have been a coded message, but I do agree with that. We did have a first-time winner for the second season in a row with this race. We had Esteban Ocon getting his first win, and the first win for the Alpine brand and the Renault and the former Renault brand in a very long time. Obviously, we have a lot more to talk about. We will talk about these. We'll talk about the because we're running out of time. We'll talk about Lewis and Max's rivalry very briefly. What is the main thing that you think of when it comes to this rivalry heading into this weekend with Spa, a very downforce heavy track?
Something that comes into mind with this rivalry is that who's going to be more aware, like who's going to be more ready, because from the statistics from the first two practice sessions, it seems like Bottas is doing well, but like Verstappen's up there.
I do agree. I did see that, and I did hear that both Max and Hamilton have added downforce rear wings that will help them in sector 2, while their teammates have more of a straight line speed. So this rivalry is trickling over to the whole team, to the whole Red Bull team, to the second drivers. Do you think this affects morale or just frustrates anybody within those teams, or do you think they like the competition?
I think they like the competition. Isn't this what the sport's about?
That is true, but when I come into that, since I'm just thinking of the comments that Christian Horner and Helmut Marko have said in the last when the incident happened in Silverstone. That's where I'm thinking, is there a bit of frustration now that it's not going their way, or is it just the competitiveness getting to them?
I think it's a mix of both, honestly, because the competitiveness is nice for media and for their sake, but I feel like the frustration is also there because those are mistakes that the Mercedes team indirectly happened.
Very true, very true. I do agree with those comments. I don't agree with some of the comments that those two individuals says, but I do agree with Toto saying, "I have sent you an email, Michael." That is my best impression. But from there, I do want to go on very quickly to the driver power rankings. Do you agree with the fan one, yes or no?
For the most part, I do.
Gotcha. And then on to the real power ranking. Do you agree with it or no?
I feel like the Alpines are a little higher than they should be.
Okay. So I personally, and on the reverse, I do not fully agree with the fan one. I do get some of the points on the fan one, but I do agree a little more with the real power ranking. So that's just our 2 cents on that. But to very quickly move on, we briefly mentioned it earlier on the rumors heading into the driver silly season rumors. Obviously, the heavy rumor is right now that George Russell is heading to Mercedes next season. It's supposed to be announced in September. Toto decided not to let anybody know because he has other businesses like shutting down the Formula E Mercedes team. But that is neither here nor there. When do you think we will hear that? Do you think we'll hear that news by the end of the triple header in 3 weeks' time, or when do you think they might announce that? Because they said in September for sure, but do you think it'd be at the end of the triple header, or do you want to go?
Okay.
Sounds good on that. Thank you, producer Tim. I will refer to you as that now from now on. So that is your new name. Okay, so back to our note. Do you think that they'll announce that at the end of the triple header, in the middle of the triple header, or do you think they'll announce it later on in the month?
I think they're gonna announce it later on because, like, what I don't think something that Toto I think does not want to do is put an added pressure to people that think that they had. I mean, if I could, let me rephrase this.
Okay.
Doesn't want to have their drivers worried about like whether the seat's in danger or not. Like they want to like let them race, you know?
Okay, I agree with that, but knowing that it's been open, and he has openly said that these two are a consideration for next season. Don't you think that? So as you're saying, you think that they don't want that in pressure, but even with what I just said is out there in the media, don't you think that actually puts pressure on the drivers? One, for George Russell to compete, be more competitive, to outperform that car, and then Valtteri Bottas to try to stay as competitive as he is right now and not fall off like he has right now in a good amount of the races this season. Don't you think that pressure does still fall on the drivers?
It does, but you don't want to like add too much pressure, because too much and then you leave like drivers worried, and then like it'll be a confidence downgrade.
Gotcha. Okay. I agree. I understand that. And earlier on, I mentioned something about this deal. Obviously, there was a dissent with Valtteri Bottas and his own team, which I thought, in my opinion, and this is my own headcanon, I think that it might create dissent and he might be out. The only reason I say that was because of the news we got out today that Sergio Perez is confirmed to come back to Red Bull next season. I had told you, we'd had this conversation, that earlier on this week when I was doing research for this episode, there was a rumor circulating around that if George Russell didn't sign to Mercedes, Red Bull would drop Perez for Russell. Now knowing that, do you think this confirms a step closer for George Russell to get that seat, or do you think it's a step closer for Valtteri to stay in that seat?
If I'll be completely honest, it's a step closer for Valtteri because the only reason Red Bull signed Perez was because they wanted that number 2 driver that they desperately needed. And so far, Perez has been that guy outside of his like unluckiest races, which, let's be honest, Silverstone was that unlucky race.
Which completely was. But do you... Okay, and this leads me to comments that I had mentioned to you earlier on when we first started planning this episode. Helmut Marko said some comments that saying that he wanted a better productive driver, for lack of a better term, and paraphrase what he said. Well, Christian Horner was going out and saying he will be our second driver. As a driver, just kind of putting your driver hat on, hearing those two different narratives, does that confuse you if the team's going to sign you on, and then knowing that there's a rumor that came back that you might be kicked out? And the only reason I'm bringing this up because of how he was unceremoniously pretty much let go of Racing Point last year. That's the only reason I'm bringing it up with this drive with Sergio Perez, because of what happened with that. Do you think he might get a bit of cold feet later on? Like, not now, but like flashback to what happened last year where he's competitive, he's up there, but then the team's just like, well, we'll let you go later on. If any of that makes sense.
I mean, that was a little bit of a silver foot in the lining, but the situation that Racing Point had at the time was because they thought they needed a better driver combination, which right now has not turned out for Aston Martin because it's more been the opposite. And I think if I were in Perez's shoes, I would feel a little bit of the sense of the doubt because they kind of did the same thing with Pierre in 2019. And it was like they told, and almost certainly the same thing with Albon in 2020 when when they said that they were going to try to develop Alex, but then he was dropped.
Very true. And on the note of Alex, that on my how I had my notes, I had this all together because the Russell deal trickled to a lot of teams, not just in F1. It actually trickles over to IndyCar. On the note, Albon, if so, my idea was if Sergio stayed, there was heavy rumors that Albon is not going to stay as a reserve driver heading to next season. He is out of that Red Bull position as a reserve driver this year, and it was all dependent on that Red Bull deal, not the Mercedes deal, because Williams is looking for a driver right now. Because if Russell goes and Williams have been open, they said they want to replace the Russell car. They want somebody else in that car. Nick de Vries, the Mercedes Formula E driver, is the number one contender for that seat. But on that note, I'll circle back to Albon in a bit. Do you think that Russell returns to that seat if Bottas stays, or where does Russell go next season? Because they do want a new driver in that seat because they want to be that developmental team. But where does Russell go if he doesn't get the Mercedes seat?
I would want to say Williams, but like if the facts are true that de Vries might go into Williams, I think he might aim for. It's just tough because the Alpine drivers have been confirmed for next year, and Alpine has been looking into George Russell. I wouldn't know because he's singing like in the Mercedes Junior program with Toto Wolff, and it's always been the question of if not now, then when? And if that when becomes too long, it might be too late for Toto Wolff to keep him.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that's my concern because aside from being that development, the Mercedes Junior development driver, there's no capable seats. If I'm George Russell, my want is I want to go in a capable seat. I want a seat that's going to keep me in the points at least every weekend, and I don't want to be outside of those top 10 in points. I want to be in a capable car, and I don't think there's a seat open in those teams, right?
There isn't. At least all the contracts are not like that.
True. Aside from
aside from Bottas
seat, yeah, that's the only seat. But circling back to Alex Albon, because all of this has a trickle effect. Because Albon was a driver that's being considered for that second Williams team before Nick de Vries became that head driver, the heavily speculated driver to be in that seat next season. Now that is essentially the number one candidate, and Alexander Albon is no longer a candidate. I have heard, and it is prevalent to mention because he's technically an F1 driver still. He is a reserve driver. He is looking to move into IndyCar. Vassar Sullivan is a new team that is forming from a joint team this season to become its own team, and there's rumors he's likely going to go with them. And the other rumor, he might go to Andretti Autosports. And there's a rumor that former F1 driver Romain Grosjean, the Phoenix, as he likes to be called, will also be joining that team. But these are all rumors. But that's on this side of the pond, not on the other side of the pond. The other news that is related to that was that Andretti Autosport is actually looking into buying into an F1 team. I at first thought was Haas, and I had later heard a report that is not a team that we think, which a lot of people thought was the Haas team. If this is true, do you want to see the Andretti name back in F1? And two, who could that team be that they want to buy into, in your opinion?
I'm going to massively apologize because I have no clue on this situation at all, but I wouldn't think I would like to see them in anywhere. I don't think there's the time is right now, honestly.
Okay, yeah, and more. The question was more, as a Formula One fan, would you want to see the Andretti, the famous Michael Andretti, Mario Andretti last name, back in F1? And right now, I've heard it's just smoke. It's just a rumor. There's nothing. But would you ever want to see that name associated back with F1?
Honestly, no.
No? Okay. And if okay, let's put our tinfoil hats on real quick. Let's say hypothetically they somehow go against your wishes and come into F1. Who do you think they could possibly buy into?
I mean, if it's not Haas, it might be either Alfa Romeo or it could be Alpine.
Oh my goodness, you just like lit up a light in my like forehead in my head, because Fernando Alonso, once he did his Indy 500 drive a couple of years ago, his first try at it, he actually drove for that team. So that is a very good guess that I didn't even think of. So thank you. Now I have more rumors to talk about.
Oh my god.
We will talk about that on a different day. Also on the note of the schedule, there is a to be determined track. Last I heard, Coda was looking to get a second race, and the Indianapolis Road Course was looking to make its return to the F1 schedule because it's still F1 certified to run that track. Do you think we will get a second U.S. Grand Prix? Yes or no?
At the rate that the race cancellations are going at, I think it's more than likely.
Okay, on that, then continuing the question, does Indianapolis Motor Speedway get it, or does Circuit of America get that second date, the to be determined date?
I think it'll be Indy.
You think Indy? That'd be an amazing, and I would plan a trip and spend all the money for it. On that note, that is a different story. Aside from those two, so aside from the whole Bottas deal, back to drivers, there's a couple of drivers that are still out of contract. Giovinazzi is out of contract. Kimi Räikkönen is out of contract. Pierre and Yuki Tsunoda are not signed, but they are confirmed for next season. So it is just pretty much the Alfa Romeo drivers. Do we see a new driver lineup in the next season, or do we see one of those drivers staying?
I think it's more than likely that one of them leaves, if not both. But if I had to pick a driver to stay, I think I had to be Giovinazzi. As inconsistent as he is, I think Raikkonen is just a little less inconsistent. It's more inconsistent than Giovinazzi has been.
I got you. And any idea who could replace one of those? Who would go in aside from the rumored Valtteri Bottas, because he is affiliated to that team, and Williams. If
I've heard
he
rumors
is
that
ousted from.
I heard
Mercedes.
rumors that it could be Mick Schumacher moving up there, but I really think it could be F2 prospect Cal Milot, which is currently their reserve driver.
Oh, okay. And I had a prediction that we will talk about in a little bit because we're running out of time. But I do agree. I think Kimi's out. He would like to come back next season, but I don't think there's any seats for next season if he is ousted from that team. But that is generally what is going on with the rumors. We want to do some predictions, but we want to do the race predictions. Heading into this weekend, Spa-Francorchamps, a very historic track, the longest track on the circuit of the schedule. I mean, who do you have as your winner? And keep in mind, there's a possibility of heavy rain this weekend.
If I had
I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but this is we have to do this.
No, it's not that I have a problem with it. It's that I'm thinking like Lewis is going to win this just because how powerful of a driver he is in wet conditions. But like, I'm going back to the Imola mistake he did when it was wet, and then also the mistake in Hungary where the track got dry, but he chose to kept on intermediate tires. And at that point, I'm not sure who to pick.
True. I would think the safe bet would be between the top four cars of the two Red Bulls and the Mercedes. I actually will look outside from them. I think either Lando Norris, one of the Ferraris, or, and this might brighten your day up, possibly one of the Aston Martins might get the win. I don't think it's going to come from those front four cars. It will come from outside of those cars.
I don't think it's going to come from Lance specifically because he has a 5-race grid penalty unless he gets ridiculously lucky.
Well, remember, they still qualify, and he could somehow qualify on pole and only have to start 6th. So that is our kind of who do you think rounds out the podium second and third possibly? Do you think it stays within the Ferrari and Mercedes teams? One of those drivers fill in the second and third, or do you think somebody else fills those spots?
I think it's going to be Verstappen Hamilton if it does end up being a non-Mercedes winner or non-Mercedes Red Bull winner.
Gotcha. Sounds good to me. And we are going to do a quick prediction for the rest of the season. What do you think will go on? What are you most looking forward to as we head into the second part of the season? And what is, let's say, a bold prediction of yours heading into this latter half of the season?
My bold prediction: Aston Martin will finish 5th.
Ooh, that's a bold one. I don't think they will, but that's my opinion.
Come on, they're capable of doing it had it not been for Vettel's disqualification. If Vettel's that capable, then definitely Aston Martin is capable.
Gotcha. Anything you're looking forward to the end of this season, in the second half of this season?
How the Hamilton-Verstappen rivalry ends.
Don't we all? I do agree that race will be amazing. That title race will be amazing. For myself, my very bold prediction is Williams will get one or two more points finish. That is my bold prediction. What I'm looking forward to is we do have a couple of new tracks, a very controversial track, Saudi Arabia. We will not talk about the country. The track looks interesting, but some fans are not looking forward to it. But instead of the driver championship, I'm looking forward to the constructor championship because that is getting very crazy, and it's involving AlphaTauri and the Honda teams. AlphaTauri and Red Bull are actually now working together to undermine the Mercedes teams. So I'm looking forward to seeing if they can continue to work together this weekend. But my second maybe bold prediction, and I'll allow you one as well, because this just came to mind. We get 3 more wet races, and we will have 2 new first-time winners. That is extremely bold. I don't think that'll happen, but I thought that just came to my mind. Do you have a second bold prediction?
I do, and I'm not sure how believable this is. Carlos Sainz wins his first race.
Ooh. Okay. On that. Okay. Does he get it before Lando? Does Lando get a win first, or does Carlos get the win first?
I think Lando might get it first.
Okay. I needed to know. For those who don't know, they were before the Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz pairing this season. Carlos Sainz and Lando Norris still are, in my opinion, one of the best pairings in F1. But we will talk about that in a different note. Just a quick little plug in at the end of this before we head out for today. We do have, if you are a RCC student and you are listening, first off, thank you for listening. I do appreciate it. I would believe Jesus appreciates it. Our producer Tim appreciates it. I can't talk right now. But if you are in any of the areas, make sure to check out your sports. I do believe the 1st of September, we will have our football team back in action for the first time in however long, because apparently we had a pandemic, and I don't want to talk about that because it just brings me sad memories of being enclosed. Well, I was still working, but a lot of other people did not have that opportunity. But our football team will be opening up their season on September 4th, if I can know what days are at, as well as our cross-country teams will be at Redlands University for the Redlands Invitational. September 3rd, a Friday. Our volleyball teams will be the women's will be in Mount San Jacinto, and our secondary team would be in Rio Hondo. So if you guys are in any of those areas, check them out. And going back to where I want to say the 1st of September, I don't know why, but Mount San Jacinto will be hosting our RCC women's volleyball team, and then later that day they will be in San Diego Mesa, and that is those are the next couple matchups that our school has. Anything you would like to add, Jesus?
I got nothing personally to add.
Obviously, yes, you do. I just remember. By the time this episode, if you made it to this point of the episode, I do appreciate it. My rambling goes on, and Jesus has had to deal with me, and Tim has been listening to me for about an hour, so I do talk a lot. But this will be up after Wish Weekend. Make sure to head over to viewpoints.org. go to the sports section and check out Jesus's article on the race. Do you, aside from what we're looking forward to? Oh, okay. Our producer decided to give me the right web link. I don't know my own web link. I mean, our newspaper's own web link. I am terrible. It is viewpointsonline.org. Head over there, check out Jesus's article on the Spa race. Do you want to add anything about that article, or kind of get people ready and giddy to make sure they head over to check that out?
If you're looking for some action from one of the world's most prestigious sports, you could go ahead and check it out.
And we have one of the best writers on our team watching the race. We will be up early to see that, Jesus. And yes, aside from the sports article, make sure you head over to our social medias. If you can throw those on the chat, Tim, so I can plug those in. But make sure, again, to head over to viewpointsonline.org to check out all of our articles. We do multiple things. We do live entertainment, sports as noted. We do opinion pieces. We have editorials and all that stuff. You want to check us out on Twitter, head over to at RCC Viewpoints. And also it's on Instagram and Facebook with the same handle, at RCC Viewpoints. Anything else we need to plug that I'm forgetting, Jesus or Tim?
Nothing from me.
We'll try to fill this empty space with anything. Were you saying something, Jesus?
Nope, I had nothing.
Okay. Make sure you stay tuned to this podcast channel, because this will not be the only thing on here. We will have multiple other things that will be posted. We have a special secret podcast that will be going up sooner than later. Those are still being worked on. Our producer Tim and our editor-in-chief Leo are working on that, and then later down the road we will have a pop culture. So make sure you stay tuned to the podcast channel to check those out. But if that is all, I want to say thank you again for listening. I appreciate you all. Have a wonderful day. Jesus, you want to say your goodbyes?
I'll see you guys later. We're definitely going to be doing more of these. We're definitely will be.
Yes, we will. We will do more of those. I've been Jesus. I'm going crazy. He's been Jesus. I've been Brian. I hope you guys have a fantastic day. And please spare our producer, Tim, because he has to listen to this to edit it. Have a great day, guys.
See ya.